November 10th meeting was canceled. We are here, some of us are here in the depot, and there are some people via Zoom. And if you want to participate in the meeting, that is stated in our agenda today. Let's see. Let's have our call to order, which I did, our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, can we have roll call, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Jen Clark-Chris.
Here.
Bonnie London.
Here.
Tim Onderko. AJ Moyer. Jean Wilson.
Here.
Randy Elder. Beth Cohen.
Here.
Ramona Brockman. Greg Obranovich.
Okay, great, thank you. Now we're going to move to committee comment for items not on the agenda. I have one, but I will like to hear from anybody else if anybody else has one. No? So what I want to talk about is our calendar. And I know we've all been hearing from Mary Beth about some various dates in December to continue on our work. Part of my reservation about that is because it's the holidays and we have a lot of things going on, various and sundry, and I'm concerned about meeting our quorum and also concerned about adding just the extra stress during the holidays and all that. So I kind of wanted to get your feedback on what you feel about the schedule moving through this month. And I know I heard from Jean. Jean, you want to talk about how you're feeling?
Well,
with the
one question I have is the last thing we had from Mary Beth seemed to not have the December 21st. Is that now off the program or not?
So this is what we're talking about now. We, as a committee, I think it'd be nice for us to talk about the month of December and our ability to make those dates. So the 21st is.
And although I had it originally on our December monthly calendar, however, when I looked back at it, I don't have a quorum. I have Ramona is available to be there, but she is an auxiliary member, so I took that one off the table.
So I think the two dates that we have left are this coming Thursday, the 9th, and then Wednesday, the 15th, and that would be it for the month. Go ahead, Bonnie.
I am not able to do the 15th. We also have a special planning commission meeting that night, and we'll be dropping our German exchange student off in San Francisco.
So with that,
I also cannot make the 15th, Chair.
okay.
So depending on, I don't think we're going to get through the whole glossary today. So the 15th would be a continuation of the glossary. Mark, do you feel it important to be there for the last of the glossary if we can determine a quorum for the 15th?
Way to paint me in a corner there, Mary Beth. Of course it's important that I'm there. Christy will kill me. No, it's really not. Christy's the star of this particular show. So if you could make the 15th, please do so.
And are we able to do that with Bonnie being gone?
Yes, I have Beth, Randy, Jean, and Jan committed for the 15th, if that still holds.
Jean, are you okay with the 15th?
Yes, I think so. So, but we still have a second meeting this week, right, to work on the glossary? The 9th?
We could if the committee desires. If the 9th for this week on Thursday is chosen, it would be a continuation of today's meeting and just carry it forward instead of having to repost in accordance with the Brown Act.
Do you know how many days we still need for the, to get through the glossary?
Staff feels two, today's meeting and then a second one. So if you wanted to do today's meeting and then continue the glossary to the 15th and then pick back up with land use changes and everything else come January, you know, we're very flexible at this point. It's more driven by everybody's availability to participate.
So what do we think about that?
Did you
Maybe-
get comments back? Would it help, if you didn't get too many comments back, would it help people to have more time to send you comments if we did it next week rather than 2 days from now?
Yeah, Jean, you were kind enough to reply to those comments up through R, and then Randy Elder provided O to Z. So those were the only two comments I received back, but at least it was a starting point for discussion.
And I've worked on it some more today, so I have a ways further I could send you to.
How about you, Beth? Are you free those next 2 days?
I'm free on the 9th and the 15th. I am available and would prefer to continue as fast as possible so we don't extend this out too much longer.
Agreed. Yeah. I just want to make sure everybody's in the same, has that same thought process and that nobody is unduly stressed and feel rushed.
Well, this would put it back from 5 meetings this month to 3, well, what, 2, whatever. Anyway, it's not as many as it was. 5 was way too many.
Okay, so I am fine with meeting this coming Thursday and then the following Wednesday. And you're okay with that, Bonnie? And you're okay with that, Beth, sounds like? And Jean, sounds like you're okay with that? Jean?
If we can, hopefully we can maybe wrap it up between this meeting and one more. Is that what Mary Beth thinks? Possibly,
Yeah,
or
for
2
the
more meetings.
glossary would be this meeting and one more, and then
Okay.
pick up in January going forward.
So then what you're saying is if we were to finish the glossary this coming Thursday, we wouldn't need to meet on the 15th. Is that what you're saying, Mary Beth?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Does that sound good to everybody? Jean, Beth? I know
Either
Beth
one
said-
is fine with me.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so going forward, I will send out a continued agenda for Thursday, December 9th at 3 o'clock. And then next week, Wednesday, December 15th. And at that point in time, we will determine where we pick up in January. Our regular monthly meeting technically would be January 6th, but we can determine that on the 15th and go forward from there.
Any other comments for items not on the agenda?
If we finish up on Thursday, we won't meet on the 15th though, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Is there any public members on the line, Mary Beth?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Anybody else? Any have anything? Okay. So now we will go for adoption of the agenda.
I move to adopt.
I so move. Jean,
Okay, we have Bonnie and then Jean second. Can we have roll call, please?
well, second.
Dan Clark Cripps,
Yes.
Bonnie London,
Yes.
Jean Wilson,
Yes.
Beth Cohen.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Now public comment on consent agenda. Or anybody have any comments on the consent?
I move to accept the consent agenda.
Do I hear a second?
Second. Jean,
Second by Jean to accept the consent agenda. Roll call, please.
Dan Clark Cripps,
Yes.
Bonnie London,
Yes.
Jean Wilson,
Yes.
Beth Cohen.
Yes.
All right, consent agenda passes and we'll move right into committee matters.
And if I could just take a brief moment before we get underway and introduce Sarah Jennings. As many of you know, Carol has stepped up to town clerk and Sarah has stepped up to planning assistant. Carol is out of town at a conference for the remainder of the week, so I asked Sarah to participate in this meeting to take roll, do motions and minutes. So welcome, Sarah.
Welcome, Sarah. Nice to see you. Okay.
Okay, I will share my screen.
Thank you, Christy.
Okay, I think we need to make that bigger. Oops. Let's see the comments though. Okay. So, and as far as we can get today. So you'll see that I have struck out some details. And first I want to say thank you, Jean, for your input on this, and we'll go through those. And then Randy also had some input, which you'll see on the screen in the comments. And he also, he felt that the strikeouts, all the details should be deleted. So that was his input that we received today. So jump in if you have any comment on any of these words, and I'll just slowly scroll through and stop me when you want to discuss something. So objective, I just deleted some excess detail. Occupancy, changing tenant to person. And then, sorry, go ahead.
So I wondered, was there a reason for the exceptions? Why were they in there in the first place? Are there reasons of ABC definitions or regulations that were supposed to show those exceptions, or
it was just, I think it was just detail coming out of the zoning code definitions. So,
okay, so there's no regulatory reason to keep that.
No.
As far as the definition. Okay.
No. So are you okay with the strikeout?
Yeah, if there's no reason to keep.
Okay. And I'll slowly scroll. So offsite just included the words or the phrase or improvement. Office, adding a different definition. So a room, group of rooms, or building used for conducting the affairs of a business, profession, service, industry, or government. Does not include medical offices. See medical service, clinic, lab, urgent care, medical service, doctor office. And then striking the rest. These are in the zoning glossary.
The zoning is going to have a separate glossary?
It's in the code now. So these are taken from what is in the code right now.
Where will they actually reappear?
Well, these are being put into the general plan glossary. Everything in the code is all still there. So those don't change until there is an update to the code.
In other words, I'm asking these things, all these different types of offices, where do they reappear so that somebody can know what we mean by those? We're taking them out of the glossary.
They should reappear in the land use table of your zoning code rather than in the definitions.
Right.
So I think, Jean, you were asking, is there another glossary for the zoning code? Is there?
Well, I was wondering, where did these reappear? And Mark said they will be in a land use table. Is that correct? Someplace?
Yes, in the table of uses by each zone district, there will be a list of the various uses that are allowed in those districts.
Besides the use, this is a description that's more than just one word.
I guess part of the discussion, Jean, would be whether you need to define something If you're going to regulate them separately, then it's worth a definition. If you're not going to regulate them separately, then you can have a more generic definition.
So these definitions are or are not going to appear someplace, or is it just going to have a one word and we assume that people can figure that out for themselves? As a planning commissioner, I find that if people have some idea what we're talking about when they start looking for, can I do this? They need more than one word. And that's why I'm concerned if all these things are actually just turning into one word in a table, that isn't very helpful either to the commission or to the applicant.
The zoning code includes a list of definitions, which is where these would be still maintained.
No,
Okay.
Christy, the intent is that we just have one glossary and not a separate glossary. So again, if anything, it shouldn't be in definitions in the zoning code or here. It should be in, as Mark mentioned, the list of uses that are permitted.
So will the list of uses actually contain these descriptions, or it will just say government, process, and professional, and that's it, as we have in our current charts? Is that what we're talking about? Are we doing away with all these descriptions so that people really can't have any good idea of what it is? It's up to them and the planning director, I suppose, and to figure it out. In other words, what are we leaving out? What are we keeping? It looks like I think I'm hearing that we're leaving everything out except a list of accessory business government processing with no descriptions any place. Is that what we're hearing? Is that what I'm hearing or not?
I think we're listening to you here, Gene, about how we approach this. Generally, where it's regulatory, it shouldn't be in the glossary. And so the question is, if this...
I don't care if it's in the glossary as long as it goes someplace that people can find the information.
I understand that. I understand that. You know, my recommendation right now is leave them in this glossary, and let's make a note that we take a look at both the general plan language when it comes all together, and we look at the zoning code. But again, the intent is that the town of Loomis has one glossary so that we're not duplicating anything and not getting into conflicts. So I would leave these in here right now to further define office.
Okay, I will unstrike.
And if they can be moved into the zoning ordinance someplace, you know, that's fine as long as they just don't disappear.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, they're there right now. It would be a matter of would we delete them from the zoning definitions when that's updated, when that ordinance is updated. So I will leave them in. Okay, so office park is struck. We have, and then we have a different definition for that. So an office complex set in park-like surroundings with such facilities as parking lots, restaurants, and recreation areas. And then striking the last part, a planned assemblage of buildings. And we have no definition for workplace use, so that's struck. And then office supporting retail, again, is that too detailed for the general plan? It's in the zoning definitions, but based on just the conversation we just had, let's leave that then.
Yes.
As well as office use.
Yes.
And then moving down to, this one should get a bit of discussion, open space.
Wait, I had a question on open fencing. I didn't understand what that third part was talking about. Can somebody give me an example? What I don't know what that means. probably it's pretty clear, and I just don't have a visual picture of what on earth that means.
I think
I gotta admit, I don't know what it means either, Gene. The first part of it makes sense, but used in conjunction with recreation and seating areas, that's a head scratcher. To me, that's regulatory. I'd end it
Yeah.
right after log iron, be done with it.
Yeah, I agree.
Good
And
catch, good catch,
We
Gene.
also have, well, if we're taking out the where, because I'm thinking we also have wire fencing, you know, deer fencing, that kind of thing in the countryside, but that's, we do have a walls and fences ordinance, so as long as it's in there, it doesn't matter if it's not mentioned here.
I was just gonna, I'm sorry, Andy, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Mark.
Well, I was just thinking, Christy, we should just make a note and just say fencing, and then like we've done with others, we should have all the different types of fencing under that. Because I don't know, as a planner, I would look at open fencing. To me, that's a sight distance question when you come to an intersection.
It's because we have a regulation that you can only have solid fencing up to 4 feet in the front setback, and you can have 6 feet in the back of closed, you know, solid fencing. Then you can have 2 feet of open fencing above the 6 feet in the back. And in the country, you can have deer fencing that's, you know, obviously open. So,
Yeah, there's,
you know,
to me, they're all still types of fencing that could probably go under one definition. So that if somebody was looking for a definition of fencing, they can go to one spot and it'd all be listed. That'd be how I would do it anyway.
And that is not in our old general plan, open fencing.
It's from the zoning definitions. It's in the code.
Fencing is also not in our glossary currently.
I don't know if we need, you know, if we need all kinds of definitions. It's just open fencing is a specific concern here. But the seating areas and recreation, I had no idea what that was talking about. So we can probably go on.
Okay.
We maybe
Okay.
just add wire or something, and it would be sufficient for open fencing.
Yeah, that's good. But I will also check what other definition we have to, maybe we just compile them all together. Okay, so open space. Open space is an area where there are no improvements, but rather an emphasis on keeping the land in its natural state and may include conservation areas. Open space may surround areas of passive or active park. So Jean, I integrated your comment on here, so it's on the screen in red. People want to be able to see that. So I know you are concerned about making a distinction between open space and passive park when previous work by the Open Space Committee combined those.
No, the Open Space Committee was not talking about undeveloped as in undeveloped, basically undevelopable. It was specifically for passive park, what we're now calling passive park, we used to call open space. And that is what is there. We have an ordinance collecting fees for that or land dedication. And I don't, my huge concern here is that we don't confuse a developer, for instance, of saying, oh, any undevelopable place that I have, I'll just turn it over to the town and call that my open space, when really the town intended that we should get land that is usable as a passive park, not the dregs of what some developer can't do anything with anyway. And if we keep this definition that came from another committee and it works for what they were trying to do, I realize that. If we keep that as that definition, and yet we have in our ordinance another use of the term that is distinct from that. I think it's confusing. So we need to if we're going to have a definition here, we need to have a definition that covers both of those kinds of uses. As well as I pointed out, there are a couple of paragraphs in, I think it's conservation of resources, the opening paragraphs, and they talk about open space in a very generalized term. So
how do you feel?
Documents are using the term in different ways, and I think to use the term that came from that committee, which is fine for the conservation kind of things that they want to cover, I think that is problematic. And the specific problem would be if we call that kind of thing open space and have a different meaning of open space in our ordinance for collecting fees, that can be a specific bad problem down the road.
How do you feel about on the screen at the bottom, the open space definition with the 1, 2, 3, and 4?
And that's from the old open space land above. It's just open space land definition.
Right. We have eliminated the use of the term of open space land in the document and just using the word open space. So how do you feel about that definition instead of the one up above?
Well, you've added to it the outdoor recreation for which it may surround areas of passive park. That won't work if what we mean is passive park. That is what was meant in the ordinance and in open space 1 and open space 2 committees. It meant passive park. What we're now calling passive park. We didn't call it passive park then, we called it open space. And we're collecting money for it. We have over $200,000 collected for that, but it's not if you wanted to call it instead outdoor recreation for which it can surround, if what we mean is, if you want to put in passive park, but I don't want a developer to come in and say, well, I'm doing something else here and conserving, preserving, therefore I can count that and I don't have to pay the town any money. Because if we don't show pretty clearly what we mean is, when you get a regulation that says you owe for active parks, what is called parks in the regulation, and an open space, which is called now called passive parks, if we don't make that clear, then either the developer or his lawyer is going to say, hey, we shouldn't have to pay for this because we're giving you 10 acres of wetlands that we can't live because we can't use it because after all, Army Corps said we have to keep the people out of it, but we'll give it to you and not have to pay any passive park fee. So how do we make sure that we don't define open space here in a way that allows that to happen? Because it was never intended when we passed that law, that ordinance for collecting the fees or the land dedication. It was never intended to just give it away for people for the land they can't use anyway. It's intended for people to be able to use it.
So Jean, this is Bonnie.
Yeah.
If I'm understanding what you're saying, it sounds like you want to separate conservation areas from open space, so that open space is not just, natural spaces left alone. We want to make sure that there's an intent that it's for recreation or passive enjoyment. Is that correct?
Yes, and I'm particularly interested in making sure it gets linked to the ordinance.
Well, let me let me talk here a little bit. First of all, there's a single glossary, so this will work also for the zoning code and whatever modifications you made. Let's be careful that we're not conflating regulation with definition. And maybe Andreas, you need to chime in here. This should be a relatively simple definition of open space. Now, in terms of what credit somebody may or may not get as a result of the ordinance, that should be in the ordinance itself. It should not be in the definitions. So is there a way
Totally
to
agree with that, Mark.
Okay, so is there a way that we can simply define what open space means in the context of the town and leave the dedication and development potential and all of that for the actual ordinance in a way that seems to satisfy everybody's worry here?
The ordinance does not define it though, because we know what, at the time we wrote it, we knew what we were talking about because there were two committees that worked on that under that understanding. But if we put in other definitions now, I mean, yeah, what do? Go back and redefine it in the ordinance, redo the ordinance? Don't we have?
That's the simple answer, Gene, yes.
So is there, in the ordinance, Gene, is the definition, did you supply that definition with your comments?
What then?
We have the
Well,
ordinance now, right?
Christy looked up, I don't have it in front of me. Christy looked up the ordinance. I don't think it says anything other than parks and open space, by which they meant what we now call active parks and passive parks. Christy, was there any other language in there?
I think it uses all three. I don't have that open in front of me right now, but I think it does talk about open space, but I think passive and active are also in that text.
And was
I don't
conservation
remember.
also, because it sounds like for the definition that Jean is looking for is maybe to remove the first one for conservation areas, that would be a separate type of land use?
Could we look at the little suggestion even, and maybe that I made, Christy?
Right. So at the top of the screen here, this is your addition. So open space, the undeveloped, less developed, and agricultural areas around the town's more developed central core, the parcels that create the town's semi-rural country atmosphere. Parks, a passive park. 3, conservation, an area in its undeveloped natural state, an area set aside for conservation of resources.
So the first one was taken basically a condensation from the first 2 paragraphs of the conservation of resources, which talks about open space in that general way. So it's in that element, both the new one and the old one. It's basically the same couple of paragraphs. So we don't have to put that. We could leave that out. I would like to see the parks specifically as a passive park, and then something about conservation, and we can use the other one that was proposed. That's fine with me too. I just don't want the developer to come in and say, oh, I can just do a conservation area because after all, I can't develop it anyway. It's wetlands, or it's got whatever. So I don't have to do anything to give it to I don't have to do anything to the park to the town to help develop passive parks, just active parks. And that's not what we meant.
But I think there would be more traction if we update the actual language that's in that subdivision code requiring the park area. I think that would give the town more strength to apply that and say, no, you can't just give us your undeveloped places and call it a park.
Yeah, to kind of reiterate what Mark said earlier, this isn't where we're going to determine what a developer owes the town for some development. We're going to do that through regulatory language down the line in the zoning code, in subdivision code. Right here, we're really just trying to establish what we consider open space.
So what do we consider open space? That's the question then. Is the question that we only consider open space as basically the conservation areas, or is it something else besides that?
So Jean, the
Problem
in the
with
yellow,
what Jean suggests.
go ahead, Beth, sorry.
I see no problem with what Jean suggests, that there's 3 types of open space in general. That there's the town's, atmosphere, which is basically all the agricultural property that surrounds the area. There's passive parks, and then there's conservation areas, and all 3 of those are open space.
From a purely planning perspective, we wouldn't differentiate between an active or a passive park. But I can understand not wanting to do that here. I just want you to know that planners would consider parks open space.
Correct.
What do they mean by open space then, Mark?
I think your definition is fine. I just don't know that we would parse it down to passive only. We would just say parkland.
I actually like the in the yellow, the open space, an area of land or water that is essentially unimproved, just as a general statement versus specifically stating areas of our town. I feel like I like the generalization of that first sentence versus,
Managed
Geographically
production-
limiting where open space is
yeah,
through
I don't
what
think,
Jean suggested, I think could be problematic because we could have open space within the middle of the town, depending on the use.
yeah, I think because it could give an option for more of it.
I would say on the 4 items there, managed production of resources, if that's basically farmland or something along that line, it's not going to be unimproved. And a passive park, an active park in number 3 is not going to be unimproved either. And I'm not sure what is the public health and safety that's unimproved. What is meant by that?
Typically, that would be floodplain or things like that, slopes.
Detention
Areas
basin.
that would be hazardous.
Yeah.
Well, back to your item there in blue, Jean. If we said the undeveloped, unimproved, the undeveloped, less developed, and agricultural areas in the town, instead of having it say more developed central core, you know what I mean? Can we just leave it more general? So
That would include, yeah, that would work.
You just say undeveloped, less developed, and agricultural areas.
Of
Like
town.
that. These are only going to apply to the town, so it would be redundant, I guess, to say to specify that. If we can add it. That doesn't matter, but this would just be a little more concise.
Strike out the rest of that part.
The
right?
parcels.
Yeah.
Oops. And then maybe just say parks.
Yes, because to me, open space is, as Mark said, an active or a passive park. It's still open space the way I have defined it as a planner for a long time.
So one of the things we need to do is go take to the, somebody needs to take to the council the request that they clarify the language in the ordinance.
Correct.
So we ask like one of our council members to do that, or we ask Mary Beth to do that.
Well, when this is all coming to the council for adoption, part of the adoption will be that you now move forward and make corrections and bring your zoning codes and your other codes up to be consistent with the general plan. So that will be in the resolution of the council when they adopt the general plan.
But
Now,
I think to Jean's point, it would be good to leave it in the column to the right as an item. We don't want to forget about it, because I know we won't forget about it, but that it is a concern for this committee that we do need to go back to that ordinance and redefine it.
Well, my thinking is there may be some priorities, and this may be a priority. It's kind of like you're moving forward with the inclusionaries ordinance right now, the housing element recommended. So if anything, if you feel this is a priority to go in and update those codes, then I think that's how to phrase this.
Well, given that we happen to have the major development that's ever going to come to this town in this 20 years, right now, having that issue up for grabs, it's not.
It's not. They are coming under the prior adopted. I mean, whatever was adopted on the date that they submitted their preliminary application is what they have to comply with. So this is not changing that at all.
Christy, can you just put like a review comment over there that is to revise the ordinance?
That would be fine.
Okay.
And then for the conservation part here, I don't care which definition, you can use whatever the parks one wanted. That's fine too. Do we want to add the public safety or public health and safety from the list below?
It is in our current general plan.
I would recommend you do that because there may be situations where you want to show that as open space.
And also outdoor recreation is in our current general plan.
So perhaps maybe under 2, instead of saying parks, say outdoor recreation.
That would be appropriate.
Does that seem okay? The item in blue.
So do you think that would include, Jan, the things that are in the 4 items? Do you think those are sufficiently covered then?
Conservation of natural resources is number 1. And
Your number 3 is your natural resources one, but it doesn't talk about the conservation of those resources. Oh, I'm sorry, it does.
Yes.
It does after, okay.
yeah, we have rolled together the conservation of resources and in with the preservation, I guess, although preservation is not in there, the word.
Yeah, to me, conservation and preservation are the same.
Okay. What do you think, Bonnie? I think we're wordsmithing the blue, but we're looking at the yellow to make sure that we've incorporated, because the yellow is from our general plan. We're going to make sure that it's
As far as the way we're doing it, 1 and 3 are areas and 2 and 4 just are phrases.
Right.
Maybe we need to make this open space lands then.
We had gotten through that with deleting open space lands, deleting lands when we encountered that in the element. So that would be if we had lands, it wouldn't correspond to the language in the element.
I'm just trying to make the stuff in blue read well, because we have, as I said, 1 and 3 are areas, and then 2 and 4 just say, I mean, you can't really say open space is outdoor recreation or open space is public health and safety.
So we could say outdoor recreation areas.
Okay.
Do the same with public health and safety.
That should work.
Yeah, areas to promote public health and safety.
Oh,
Or protect.
Protect is probably better. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you, Jean.
Oh, Bonnie.
All
Okay.
of us just rocking and rolling.
oh, he's trying to compete with Gene for wordsmithing.
Okay. So are we good with that definition in blue?
Yes. I don't see
Okay.
anybody. Okay.
Okay. So I will strike that. I will go back and eliminate all of that. And then we can get rid of this too. Okay. So on open space element, Jean, you had a few more comments, and you suggested it state this.
Well, we don't have an open space elements per se.
Right. It is. It's combined into others, which is allowed under state law for that. So it's combining it into a different titled element is fine. This definition is pretty much just reflecting the state guidelines for the general plan.
Do we even need to put anything then?
We probably don't. We can probably delete this.
Yeah, it's in the state guidelines.
Yeah, the only reason, if we were going to keep it in here, then we need to say open space element, one of the mandated elements included in this general plan in whatever the title of the ultimate element is. That way, if somebody's looking for the open space element, they can find it. That's all.
Yeah, good point.
Looks
Okay,
like we have a public comment from Dave.
Dave, you may unmute.
Hi, I'm concerned about the open space when you say public health and safety. I don't think those two should even be in the same sentence, because open space has to do with land and preserving land. It has nothing to do with people. So we need to kind of like keep that separate, wouldn't you think?
Well, as we had discussed, open space lands could include areas where you wouldn't want development to occur to protect public safety. As Mark mentioned, flood zones or areas of really steep slopes. Those are places where you wouldn't want to have structures or, full-time occupation.
So are you planning on using these open space lands for buildings in the future? Is that the...
No, it would be to not have buildings.
Okay, because open space is open space, that's land. And when you don't have buildings on land, it would just be open space. So I don't know why we even are using the public health and safety inside the same phrase as open space. It doesn't belong there.
Hey, Dave, this is Bonnie. As a nurse, I would disagree just because I encourage people to get out and walk. And some of the safest places to walk would be some of the open space areas that might have trails, because you minimize the risk of being hit by cars. And exercise is really important, and fresh air and those sorts of things.
I understand that. And my definition of an open space would be bike paths or place where people could go and visit or walk, or a duck pond. That would be open space that we would want to preserve. Automatically, open spaces, the majority of them are public access. Like we have over at Loomis Basin Park South. You could walk the horse trail around the water. You could walk the park on both sides. That would be an open space. It's already in it that it's for the public. I think we know that. It doesn't have to be said. That's
Okay,
all
Dave.
I'm saying.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. All right, so we're moving on. We were talking about the open space element, and we've moved on from there. Is there actually an open space element in this general plan?
There is, in the sense that it's combined with other elements. So it's talked about with the conservation of resources element. But the open space element, that phrasing is from the state guidelines for general plans.
Okay.
And I took out the part that said we had an inventory, because we don't have an inventory.
Okay, let's.
So we can use the definition in blue that Jean provided. Does that sound suitable?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so moving on, ordinance. We just made this more relevant to the town, saying a law or regulation set forth and adopted by the town instead of a government authority. And then moving on to P, parcel. A lot or contiguous group of lots in single ownership or under single control. Striking, usually considered a unit for purposes of development. And moving on, we get to park. A park is an area of land open to the public for recreational purposes, includes active park and passive park. And this is from our definitions created in the parks element. No comment, I'll move ahead. Park strip, that portion of a public street between the curb and the sidewalk, or the sidewalk and the property line, or that portion of the right-of-way which is not designed or used for vehicular or pedestrian travel. Which seems, I understand your question, Jean. This refers to the area that's adjacent to the street. So where a vehicle might park but wouldn't be driving, or say the vegetated strip along a street. Does that make sense?
So the area between the roadway and something is the park strip. Even if we're not, I'm looking at rural areas, for instance.
Right,
So
where you might not
that's
have a
still-
sidewalk.
That's still called a park strip. Whatever is in the roadway easement, is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, I would say it's more like the vegetated area that's still within the easement. Or perhaps just a curb.
Okay.
Where'd this definition come from, Christy?
I'm trying to jog my memory, and I don't know if that's something that's from the.
Are we regulating something that we need to define this?
I don't
It's
think
not-
so.
It's not in our old general plan.
It's either taken out of the code, or it's from perhaps the circulation.
Yeah, this is a circulation term or something you would see in a set of street design conversation. This is a piece of grass, usually between the curb and the sidewalk. If you don't have the sidewalk up against the curb, that piece of grass is called a park strip, or traditionally is called a park strip. In a rural community, that may also be a drainage ditch. It's just that piece of land. It's not really designed for people to walk on, so it's not a sidewalk, though people may cross it, and you certainly don't drive on it, or you shouldn't drive on it. I don't know we wouldn't, this is too granular for a general plan unless it's part of the circulation element, street typology discussion. So if you want to delete it, that's cool. You just need to check to make sure it wasn't referenced in the circulation element.
Yeah, I will do that.
Maybe it was in the like, maybe it was in circulation, but someplace we have on the street design kind of thing that you have to have, like for the street trees in the sidewalks and things. I don't know where that ended up in the zoning ordinance, but could have come from there too, I suppose.
Yes, and it could also come from the subdivision ordinance, because it's something you would have to set aside. It would typically be within an easement, and it is where you'd put street lights and fire hydrants and whatnot.
Okay.
So I'll just do a check and see if we use that in the general plan at all.
Or in the elements, because
Right.
again, this glossary is for everything.
Right. Okay, passive park. Park that is primarily a public area of predominantly undisturbed or restored natural land with little disturbance to topography and vegetation, that provides passive recreational activities, walking, jogging, photography, etc. Any objection to that?
I like it.
Okay. So moving on, I think this is just an update from the circulation element, and then pedestrian orientation. Do we want to delete these details?
I say delete.
Okay. Everyone agree to delete?
And I just saw Anders put a chat up that said park strips not in our ordinance anywhere.
Okay.
Andreas did that.
Okay,
sorry.
so I'll check the element to see if it's in there.
We're easy to confuse. We look very similar, Anders.
You're right.
Sorry, my speed reading was.
Hey, that's an attorney kind of comment, you know?
So moving on to pedestrian oriented use. Jean, you had a question on here where you said that this definition also assumes spontaneous draw, which isn't necessarily the case when people get used to a pedestrian oriented area. Visits can be deliberate. And I agree that people, if I'm going downtown and I need something at Ace Hardware, it's a deliberate visitation. But I would say that Ace Hardware also has the ability to draw somebody walking down the street to come in, to stop in. They might see something in the window. Would you be okay with adding just the word "a pedestrian oriented use generally provides spontaneous draw"?
Sure. But I do also have a concern about the requiring appointments, that's is that really something so specific for in other words, we're going to have a mix of things that, you know, the barber shop, it maybe you walk in and maybe you, but the beauty shop next door to it, you might need an appointment, but that doesn't mean it's not in a pedestrian oriented area. I don't know. It just seems.
Does this come from the general plan?
Did not.
It does not. Because I don't know if you need, like Gina's saying, I think you could just say appointment, I'm sorry.
Does not limit the number of customers.
Right.
And striking this or otherwise exclude.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So moving down, there weren't any comments on any of these. If you have any, please shout it out. So moving along to planning area, Jean, you had a comment, and I think this is a good one for the committee to discuss. There is no sphere of influence. There probably will never be a sphere of influence. Do we delete that portion of the definition of planning area and just talk about the town limits?
Actually, Mary Beth, we had communication with the local area information commission. The town of Loomis may have a sphere of influence, but it is the city limits or the town limits at this moment in time. And I can't recall, Mary Beth, if she told us that they had actually adopted a sphere of influence for the town.
It is one in the same as my recollection.
It is. So we do have a sphere of influence. It just happens to be
our town boundaries.
Town boundaries.
Okay.
And I would say never. Just doing, well, just, you know, getting out of the redistricting meetings, there's a lot of areas that are in the Loomis Basin that informally consider us a sphere of influence, and who knows what the future might hold.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was loud and clear.
Okay, you know,
Except
that's
for the
fine.
outcome.
Okay, so leave
So
it.
Just leave it the way it is.
All right. Okay. So moving along, Planning Commission, this was just updated to reflect the town and not a generic definition. And moving along, poverty level, just the last sentence regarding income cutoffs, reflecting the consumer price index. That's not necessary to include. That's deleted. And then on prime agricultural land, referencing the California Department of Conservation. Not and mapping. Oh, it's land mapping.
Oh.
That's what it is. Land mapping. Okay, and that's just the definition of what they do to make that those areas map. Moving along. Project, a proposal that requires a discretionary action by the town. Do we want to address ministerial actions? Randy Elder suggested we leave it as is. Anyone else have any comment on that?
Leave it.
Is there anything that addresses ministerial actions? Because I do think it's good for people to understand the difference.
And I don't know that we define the difference between them. Let me pull up.
Well, couldn't you say a project is a proposal that requires a ministerial or discretionary action? I mean,
Yeah. we can do that.
It,
Good. Okay, property owner. So Jean, you got a comment on that one. Do you, do you agree with my edit here? The persons or company having owner's rights to the property, such as land or structures,
Oh,
and who
okay.
is responsible for the payment of any rates and taxes associated with that property.
That's fine.
Okay.
It was just a word switch.
Yeah. Okay, public and quasi-public facilities. There's just an addition there. Any comment on that here? Here none. So we can move on to Q, qualifying resident. Jean, I just added on to this per your comment, a person qualifying for lower income housing.
Hopefully we'll have some lower income housing for them to qualify for, but I thought we should add that as that type of qualifying resident.
Sure. Anyone else? Any comment? Okay, moving on to ours. I put in Jean's edit here of exercise or children's play equipment. I think that's a good addition to expand that a little bit. And then recreational vehicle, shall we delete the details?
Is this something that's likely to be problematic for anybody like Mary Beth?
Yeah, this is way too much and probably violates the vehicle code. I don't see what we would do with it.
Okay. Change it to a period instead of a comma there.
Yes, yeah. Thank you. Okay, recreational vehicle park. Again, this is just deleting detail. Does anyone have any objection? None. Okay, and then the same for recycling facility. All of this detail was in the zoning ordinance. Do we want to delete them, or do we want them as different definitions to keep?
Will these be retained in the zoning ordinance then? Because we need these definitions someplace. Maybe this isn't the right place. I mean, maybe they're in the zoning ordinance itself, but looking at this list, I don't think some of these things we even want in Loomis. Some of the processing.
Right. I think some of this would be too industrial.
So what happens with this if we take it out here? I'm not saying we shouldn't take it out here. I'm just saying, where does someone then go to find that information?
So then this is still sitting in the zoning code definitions.
Yeah, but it probably shouldn't be in a definition in the zoning code. It should be part of the regulation and description of allowed or not allowed uses.
It's not currently in the general plan. The general plan is just general. It says just recycle.
Yeah, but again, this glossary is for all of the documents, so we're not duplicating anything. So, you know, Andreas, my thought is these belong in the allowed uses rather than in the definitions of the zoning ordinance.
Yeah, they look more like they would go in that table. I would agree with that.
My recommendation is we make a note to make sure these go into the allowed uses table in the zoning code and not be part of the definition. And throughout this throughout these documents, that's been an issue we're trying to clean up, is get regulatory language out of the definitions and into the code itself.
Okay, I would say, yes, put a note to make sure that it gets, that it is in the zoning code rather than have to list it all here.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. 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 There's things that are not going to happen in Loomis, like this scrap and dismantle. And some of these are pretty heavy. So moving on, regional, it's just geared more towards the town instead of a generic definition. Regional park. So this would eliminate the size information. And then from the Parks and Rec element, we're talking about regional parks offer a variety of improvements, including sport fields, tot lots, and equestrian facility, and more. Do we want to say that?
I think it's too open-ended.
Did that come from the Parks and Rec Committee?
I think so.
It looks really Randy. I believe so.
Yeah, I think it's what is in that part, the draft Parks and Rec element.
I don't know if that's necessary for the definition. I really don't.
Right.
So that is an addition. That is an addition to what it was. I mean,
Right. Right. So we could just say a park focusing on activities and natural features, not included in most other types of parks, and often based on a specific scenic or recreational opportunity. And not go into sport fields, tot lots, equestrian.
yes.
And I think they're basically looking at the one regional park in the area. And
Mm-hmm.
so,
Okay, let's just strike that then and leave the first sentence. Okay, moving on. We have religious facility or rehabilitation. We just replaced housing with buildings so that it includes things that aren't necessarily housing. You can rehabilitate a building used for other purposes. And then religious facility, it's pretty much just removing the detail at the end. So of the examples of allowed accessory uses. Any comment on that edit?
I think it's a good edit because the other may sound like more like we're prescribing, which we shouldn't be doing for religious things. So I think it was a good strikeout there.
Okay. So I will keep going unless anyone else has any input. Okay, resident, a person who lives within the town on a permanent or long-term basis. Is that acceptable? Sounds like it. And then residential, land designated and zoned for dwelling units. So Jean, I crossed out buildings consisting only of, based on your comment that you submitted.
Okay.
I think does that work for you?
That should work for all the things because that would include the agricultural areas as well. So
Right,
I think that's better. Thank you.
Okay.
Do we have any potential for having residential on land that is currently not zoned for residential in the town? We have any non-conforming uses? Because just because the zoning isn't residential doesn't mean the homes aren't there. If it isn't an issue, then that's fine, but just asking.
Say that again, Mark.
So many communities will have zoning of one thing, but there's a house on the property, has been forever. So the question is, do we have any non-conforming houses? Because just because the zoning may not allow them doesn't mean there aren't homes on them.
We do have that downtown, a lot of older homes that are on Taylor and Horseshoe Bar that are still used. Some are now used as commercial, but some are still residential.
Yes, I don't know that and zoned. For the same point then designated.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's residential, people are living in it. It's really all you need to say. Whether it's conforming or non-conforming, that's another discussion in a different document. But maybe it's not that big of a deal. I'll go back to sleep.
Well, we may be talking here about not whether somebody actually lives in it, but whether is
Right.
zoned as one of our residential zones.
Yeah, that's kind of wonder whether it's getting a little jumbled up. To me, if you're going to say residential, it is a building that people live in.
Unless we say we mean residential zoning designations, land use designations.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Andreas, do you have any insight on this as a lawyer?
I don't have strong feelings from a legal perspective on this one. I think this is more of a planning term.
All right, leave it be. I can't see it causing any problems. I mean,
No.
okay.
Okay. So then we have residential accessory use or structure, and this is another one where it's just a matter of eliminating the added detail. Does this look appropriate?
Make a note there to make sure regarding the added detail that if we do want to regulate something, that should be done within the code as part of the code. And just revisit this when we're updating the code of ordinances.
Maybe if I could type. All right. So residential care facility, it was just adding disabled to that.
Is that something that that is the way that we need to, do we need to say disabled?
I think it said handicapped before.
Well, I'm wondering if we need, because are all the people who are in need of personal services, et cetera, disabled? Or could we just strike that and say who are in need of personal services, et cetera?
I agree with Gene on that one.
I do too.
Okay. There we go.
I did get a little further along than I sent in. Spent this morning doing this again.
Well, I appreciate it. Your input is always appreciated. Okay, residential care facility for the elderly. Randy Elder had a comment to remove the details, items 1 through 3. And this should say California code.
Yeah, because I think the code does define this. I don't think there's a need to do that here within the glossary.
Yeah, the only reason I didn't comment on it, Christy, was I wasn't sure if we leaned on this heavily in the housing element.
Right.
That'd be my only thing. If we used it there, forcing people to go look up the code of regulations, and that's like getting a root canal. So that was my only thought. That's why I didn't make any comment on it.
I think there are times when it's helpful to leave some things in so people don't have to go figure everything out on their own. And if people want to look up who are in the throes of looking for something, at least this starts giving them a clue as to what they might have in Loomis and what they're looking at as far as the different types of things.
Right, a quick reference guide rather than going through the whole code.
This text is also mirrored in the zoning code, items 1 through 3.
As regulation, Mary Beth, or definition?
As a glossary definition.
Okay, so that's why it's here,
Mhm.
because this will be the sole glossary for the town when we're done.
Okay. So we'll leave that then.
Correct.
Okay, residential, multiple family. So the change here was just changing it from 3 to 2 or more dwelling units.
Do we need the term usually?
Probably not.
I would dissuade from the term usually in any definition.
We'd let you argue that on the
And then residential single family is a single dwelling unit on a parcel rather than building site. Okay, moving along. Rest stop, the only change here was just deleting the reference to Interstate 80, being more general. And then restaurant, cafe, coffee shop. It's just removing some of the detail. Does anyone have any disagreement with either of those changes? Okay, moving along. We have retrofit. And again, this is one of those just adding or deleting the the detail. And review authority, changing that last phrasing to act upon permit applications, which would encompass review, approve, or disapprove. Rezoning. It's replacing nature with the allowable or conditional uses. If there's any comment, stop me. Rideshare, we've just added on-demand rides, as a lot of transit is addressing that, or dial a ride or things like that. Right of way, just expanded to include sidewalks and trails, which can be part of right of way. And moving along to rural. So this is an item we should probably discuss. So right now we've got relating to or characteristic of the countryside, where agricultural uses may extend into the heart of the community. Randy Elder had a comment stating he suggested any area outside of an urban area instead. Any thoughts on either of those definitions?
I would think that the town would balk at having any part of it considered urban.
You're right, even if technically we are.
I have avoided the use of the U word as much as possible.
So the Census Bureau defines rural as any population, housing, or territory not in an urban area.
Yeah, but then it goes on to define what urban areas are.
Yeah.
And we do have a public comment.
Dave, go ahead.
All right, let me unmute myself. Are you able to hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
I think we should leave rural the way it is. I live out in a rural area out on Delmar Avenue. And even in the areas, the neighborhooded areas going on King Road, you still feel like you're out in the country because some people got more land than others. Some of the corner lots are bigger than others. So you still feel like you're out in a rural area, even though you might have somebody living right next door to you. So do I have somebody living right next door to me, but we have land. So that's a plus, but switching to rural, I think we should just leave it the way it is. Because Loomis is a rural area. It's always been a rural area. And there's nothing wrong with leaving it the way it is there?
So there wasn't a definition before. So this is a new definition. It wasn't previously defined. So are you saying to keep it as what's highlighted in yellow?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't know that there wasn't something before. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Okay.
going through the process, we realized there are some key definitions that we should have. So rural was one of them. Anyone else have a feeling about the highlighted in yellow definition?
I'm still trying to figure out the part about agricultural use extending into the heart of the community. What if we just left it as that countryside, characteristic of the countryside? Is that too?
No, we can do that. That
Bob?
was just someone else's comment that was submitted. So
Or if we wanted to leave some of the end of it, countryside. No, I'm trying to look at some of the strikeout fits, but I'm not sure if it even does. I understand it. I feel like that's true, but I'm not sure it belongs there.
yeah, the strikeout was just a previous early attempt at a definition.
How about the rest of you? You're all in on this too.
So shall we?
One thing, you could end it with countryside because down below, then you define rural character and you talk about character up above. So it really, the two of those definitions go closely together.
Yeah, I feel like I've had this conversation with a few people that live closer to inside the town, and the argument is, well, you don't really live in a rural part of town, Jan, but yet I am surrounded by the countryside, and that is exactly what I feel rural is. And I feel like just that general statement sums it up. But then do people not agree on what countryside is? To me, it's fields and fences that are not fences. I don't know. I like that general description.
Okay. But perhaps deleting that last phrase where agricultural uses may extend.
Yeah, I mean,
Agriculture in, but I don't think, again, extending into the heart of the community, just with agriculture uses, I don't know if something may be more generic throughout town or in areas of the town.
Or what if we said relating to or characteristics of the countryside or agricultural areas?
That and agricultural areas or agricultural, yeah.
And
yeah.
Take out the comma before.
yes.
You know, you can,
What about you, Beth? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'd like to hear your opinion. She there?
I am here. I don't have a better definition of rural. I don't know. This is
But
fine.
it's okay. Okay.
All right.
You know, because rural comes up throughout this general plan, I think this is a good definition, but as we go through additional public hearings and meetings, we may want to refine and tweak this a bit, but you know, I think Jan, your explanation that you kind of feel like you're in the countryside and not in an urban area is very true. And I think even some of the more developed areas of Loomis do have that feel. So
Yeah.
Okay. So going to rural character then, a predominant visual landscape of space between buildings, topography, forests, and farms, and the activities which preserve such features. It balances environmental, forest, and farm protection with rural development and recreational opportunities.
Should we change forests to trees?
or woodlands.
woodlands, maybe.
Woodland. Mm-hmm.
Since we have put a more generalized definition to part of open space, maybe it could be restored. Instead of space between buildings, it's kind of awkward, and I don't think that's what we really meant.
Say that again.
Well, I assume that this was open space was changed to space between buildings to accommodate the limited parks definition of open space. But since we have expanded the definition of open space, we could put it back the way it was.
I suppose we can, but that's not at all what this came from. This came from one of our very early meetings as a committee, where we talked about what constituted rural and the rural character of town. Certainly, open space can go in there. I'm not suggesting it shouldn't, but this is what the committee came up with when we had a meeting, and we talked about what it means to have a rural character for Loomis. So, and what they were referring to was that buildings aren't on top of each other. You can see between them. There's space between them. Now, whether that's open or parking, I don't know. But that's where that came from, Gene.
Okay.
It was probably our second or third meeting, so it was a while ago.
I think open spaces should go back in there. So put a comment after buildings, and then, because that is a characteristic.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, does that look appropriate?
I don't know. Yeah. Space between buildings just seems odd. I don't know why.
It seems awkward, doesn't it?
It does. I feel like, shouldn't it say large lots or a larger land use, or somehow the fact that we are trying to keep
Okay, Mark, what about something about a limited building intensity or something like that instead of space between? What do you think?
Yeah, that would work. I mean, the idea here is that you don't fill the lot corner to corner with building.
Right.
That would be urban.
Mhm.
And we talked at length, and I think even Miguel got in on the conversation where we're talking about one of the things that helps define the rural character is you'll see a lot of open area and then a building and then another, the buildings are far apart. So limited building intensity, I think that works well.
Okay. Everyone okay with this?
Yeah, that's not awkward like the other one was.
All right. Okay, moving along. Safety element, just deleting that last sentence regarding what would be incorporated. School, this
Right,
is,
wait, I had a question on sanitary,
oh, yeah.
sanitary sewer. I didn't have time to look up. Do we have something for C combined sewer?
Oh,
Usually when things say C something, I go and check
yeah.
and see if we even
Okay.
have it.
I will put a note.
I didn't have time to look and see if we have that or not.
We don't have combined sewers in town, do we?
No, you don't. And
Combined sewers is when you combine it with stormwater, and I don't think that we're allowed to have that.
This must be a really old definition, Beth, because I don't think that's been allowed for at least 50 years. I mean, that's old. I agree.
My understanding, though, your drainage does go through your sewer system, so you may have it, the maintenance issues.
And there is no definition for combined sewer.
I would delete it.
I'm just checking that. I'm just going to strike this.
Did you want to strike septic system also?
It's a separate thing.
Okay.
Right, it's not.
Having one, I understand.
Yeah, let's make sure we just have that as a separate
Okay.
definition, which we should be coming upon soon. Okay, so school, just getting rid of what all of this including would be. So a public or private academic educational institution, and then does not include preschools and child daycare facilities. See also definition of studios. Does that look okay?
My comment here is when we get down to studio, it refers back to this provision under schools for this, to see this definition for specialized education training, except we're taking them out.
Okay.
So we'll need to look at that maybe when we get to studio, but make a note that that's, if we take it out here, is that okay? Or do we need to leave at least part of that in? The part about specialized education training, maybe not all the rest of things about internet, et cetera.
Okay.
I'm sorry,
I didn't
maybe
look up-
also,
I didn't look up to see if we have definitions of all. Oh, we do have the studios. Okay, go on.
Bonnie?
and I'm sorry, I just know that in the homeschooling movement, there's some controversy about learning centers because they're trying to kind of bypass needing to meet requirements of schools. And so, I just don't know where you guys might want to include that, but that is a thing.
Yeah, and I also don't think those are in the glossary, the art, dance, or music or anything for those. That must have come from the zoning code.
Yeah, it's from zoning.
School isn't even in our general plan.
Okay. Bonnie, did you want to add something here or a different definition?
I'm, again, this is just off the top of my head, but I'm just wondering if maybe something about accreditation or approval through some kind of, I know that we don't want to be regulating and approved.
Maybe an accredited
Hey,
What's
our
or no?
point with that?
That all is starting to sound regulatory to me.
Right. Bonnie, what's the issue with the learning centers? I'm sorry, I don't understand.
So they're bypassing some of the California state regulations in order to be able to, homeschool students in a center with, like, instead of a teacher, a guide. But essentially, they're trying to accomplish the same thing, that it is a site where they're trying to teach children, but just using different language, because then they don't have to meet the same requirements. It's a big thing that's starting to happen more frequently.
I just don't know what role we would have in that. What would the land use implications of that be?
Well, I know with our schools, because again, you've got large amounts of children that are meeting around the same time. So there's traffic, there's transportation. Again, I mean, it would be along the lines of like studios and learning centers, maybe.
Learning center.
That all looks regulatory to me, but okay. I mean, maybe we add a definition for learning center, because I know there's a number of them around that do testing as well. So if you want to, take your test for whatever, you can go to these centers and sign in and do your test there. It's proctored. So I don't know if that would qualify. It's not really a center for instruction, but I do know they have classes. Anyway, okay. Learning center, that would be interesting. Okay, thank you. I learned something.
I don't know if it's still there, but maybe a decade or less ago, we did approve, maybe it's something like Bonnie was talking about. I'm not sure. People would homeschool and then they would bring their kids in a certain number of days and they would be checked by a tutor and testing and some things like that. But I don't have any idea where they were as far as any regulations, and homeschooling doesn't really require a whole lot as far as registering as a homeschool. And so I'd be concerned if we're trying to get into those regulations.
Yeah, I don't really know where it would stand. I mean, I'm just wondering if do we want to be able to have these informal groups that essentially are functioning just like a school, but not needing to meet the requirements of the school?
Can we say at the end of that first sentence, just say or learning center?
Bonnie,
We should try to accommodate those people, to be honest. I don't think it needs to be a definition in our land, in our general plan. It's regulated by the Department of Education. So what are we trying to do with it?
No, the problem is they're bypassing the Department of Education. That's the problem.
So these are people who are not registered as homeschools?
No, just learning centers.
I mean, even just like the tutoring centers, like Mathnasium or whatever.
Right.
But like,
except that they drop their kids off. Usually it's like 8 to 3. And it's
a longer,
functioning just like a school. And they have recess and they have lunch and they have, I mean, I'm just thinking of Acton specifically. Right.
Well, if it's zoned for schooling, then we shouldn't. I mean, if the land use is for school, I don't think we should also say school and learning center, because then we're encouraging people to try and bypass. I don't like the idea of adding it at all.
Well, we have to decide which are the institutions that are bypassing and which are the legitimate institutions that are doing something properly.
So what I'm trying to actually make the distinction is that it is not a school. And so adding it into a separate definition of like maybe studios and learning centers, because it really should go in the bottom part.
Right.
So art, dance, martial arts. Yeah.
What if we say, do you want to wrap it up with studios, or just have that separate C definition of studios or learning center?
I think studios and learning centers.
And learning centers, but separate from studio.
Yes.
And there is an upcoming term that we would need to adjust.
Okay, I'm just going to make this bold so we can.
So we're going to need to make a definition of learning centers at some point.
So there is a definition that is studios, art, dance, et cetera, coming up. That I,
Right.
Right, but I think people understand more intuitively what is an art, dance, martial arts, music studio than they do what is a learning center, because Bonnie is trying to distinguish somewhat, I guess she would say, are legitimate and some aren't.
So they, I mean, I think they would describe themselves as educational enrichment.
and we do have a public comment.
Dave, you may unmute.
Hi, listening to the comment, and when you say a studio, because I did martial arts for years, martial arts studio is something for after hours. It isn't something that you're learning to learn as in going to school. And if we allow these schools in here who aren't certified or who aren't licensed by the state of California, like everybody else has to be in order to do the right thing, for one, we're cheating our children out of the right education by allowing these people into our town who are by passing the California law. If they want to come into our town, they have to abide by the California law. So we know that our kids, and I don't even have kids, that our kids of Loomis are getting the best education that we could get from people that are registered with the state of California. And if they're that good, then there's no reason why they shouldn't be registered with the state of California.
Okay.
Are
And
these
you can't
centers,
compare a studio, martial arts studio, or a dance studio to a learning center, because that's education. That is something that will it will enhance the children's future. Martial arts is usually something that you do after, or a dance studio. That's totally different. And you can't even compare the two because they're two opposites.
Okay. Go ahead, Bonnie. You had a comment back on that?
No, I'm just, again, maybe this is something that we mull around, because we also do have our Loomis Library and Community Learning Center. And the point of that was that it was for educational enrichment for all ages. And so just something maybe we want to kind of sit on a little bit, make distinctions.
Bonnie, are these centers actually illegal?
No, they're not illegal, but they push the envelope quite a bit. We went to one for about a month. And again, as you know, to Dave's testament, these guides are not, there's no regulation to train them. They don't have any kind of accreditation. They skirt a lot of different laws that the schools have to follow. But they, at the time, were taking funding. I mean, it's a sticky issue that maybe we want to even pull in our school, partners to kind of get some input on that.
When you say taking funding, are you meaning public funding, or you mean people pay them?
At the time, it was public funding that, essentially, let's say I took my kid out of the public school, then I could get money from the school that I could apply towards this learning center as homeschooling dollars. I think there's a lot of legislative changes since then, though. And again, I don't think this is something we're going to be able to solve tonight. I think that we need maybe some input from our schools. And again, is this really the appropriate place? It's just something I wanted to point out because they are popping up quite a bit.
Should we just highlight that and revisit it?
Yeah, I think so.
So we might or might not keep that phrase. We might do something else with it. Okay.
Yeah. Let's come back to that.
All right, committee. Well, it's 4:57. We can roll on and end with seismic, or we can stop and talk about our next meeting. Seismic is the end of the page.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right, so let's finish this
Okay.
page.
All right, so going back for secondhand store, we just it's the same, deleting some of that extra detail about what's included or not. And then on second unit, I just made a reference to accessory dwelling unit instead of all of this. So we have a definition for accessory dwelling unit, and I think it's probably simpler if we just reference that and have that one definition.
Do we separately define junior accessory dwelling units, or do we have that rolled into the accessory dwelling unit definition?
We did. I don't think we did, Junior.
Let me see.
Because if it's a separate definition, we should also reference that here. If it's included within ADUs, then I think this is fine.
We have a separate one. So we have accessory dwelling unit and accessory dwelling unit, comma, junior.
So let's point to both of those.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So shall we finish at seismic?
Any comments on seismic?
I think it's a good place to stop.
All right.
All right. It's almost 5 o'clock. It looks like we'll be reconvening in just a couple days, and I think we're really on a roll here and did really well tonight. Thank you, everybody. We got a lot done. There's only, gosh, not that many pages left. So I think it's looking good for this coming Thursday. Thank you all so much. And thank you for coming back again in 2 days. We will see you then.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.